The first time I believe I ever touched a video game console was when my mom took me to visit her friends. When we arrived, they asked me, why don't I play with the other kids in the garage? I said, sure. I figured they were probably playing with Hot Wheels or Army Men as usual. But when I walked in, her kids and the other kids were all huddled around a CRT television, completely mesmerized by Super Mario World. To me, this felt like actual magic. Up until that moment, I thought video games were strictly exclusive to giant arcade machines. My only context for a controller was the one we used for the TV, so I genuinely assumed controllers of any kind were only meant to change the channel. So it was incredibly strange watching them move these little colorful characters around the screen, all powered by this gray and purple box. I had seen a couple of commercials for Nintendo on the TV before, but I never understood what they were actually advertising. Usually, I just ignored them until DuckTales or whatever else I was allowed to watch came back on. So, curiosity got the better of me. I stood behind the kids, watching intently, noticing how pressing specific buttons made Mario do different things. And then, they offered me the controller, but I immediately shook my head and said no. Honestly, I was terrified that if I pressed the wrong button, I'd accidentally change the channel and ruin their game. Eventually, after they beat the first castle, they made their way back, paused the game, and insisted it was my turn to try. I figured, okay, fine. I've been studying what they were doing, so I shouldn't embarrass myself too much. I felt so embarrassed, and because of this, they realized I had never touched a video game before. So they patiently taught me the basics, and after I managed to duck under a couple bonsai bills, I panicked and jumped straight into a pit. Even though my turns were brief afterwards, I loved it. It was so much fun that the second my mom came to get me, I turned to her and asked if she could get me a Mario. I didn't know the console was called the Super Nintendo. In my childhood mind, the system itself was just called the Mario. My mom then turned to her friend to ask, what on earth am I talking about? To then tell my mom that I'm probably speaking about the Nintendo. Lo and behold, a few months later, she came home with a surprise. It was a Nintendo Entertainment System bundled with Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt. When my family hooked it up, it seemed fine to me. The console and controller looked totally different from what I remembered, but I assumed it was like a television or a VCR, just a different brand. To me, it was just a less colorful version of the Super Nintendo I'd seen. And hey, the controller only had 2 action buttons, which I figured was great. Fewer chances for me to accidentally change the channel. Funnily enough, I actually enjoyed Duck Hunt far more than Mario at first. Once I discovered that pressing select let me use the zapper, I was hooked. Before figuring that out, I spent most of my time running around the house pretending to be a cowboy or a cop, since the zapper didn't do anything in the Mario game. As for Super Mario Bros., it was fun. However, it wasn't the game I actually wanted, but my childhood brain kept rationalizing it. I thought, okay, if I just play far enough, the game will eventually transform into the levels I remember from Super Mario World. Because the game slowly would introduce new elements, like Hammer Bros and those Olive Koopas. I assumed I was steadily climbing my way towards the better Mario graphics. Though, of course, that never happened. Eventually, after beating the entire game on my 3rd run-through, I noticed absolutely nothing was changing. So I finally went to my mom and asked, how much longer until the better Mario levels show up? You know, the one with the green thingy right on that eats apples. Thankfully, my mom managed to decode what I said and explained that it was an entirely different game, but she said she'd see if she could find it for me later. So, sometime later came along and she did deliver. She came home with 3 new games: Yoshi's Cookie, Dr. Mario, and Super Mario Bros. 2. They were fantastic. Yoshi's Cookie and Dr. Mario were brilliant puzzle games. My mom completely fell in love with Dr. Mario, and for a while it became her absolute favorite. Personally, I preferred Yoshi's Cookie, plus it featured Yoshi, the exact green thing I had been looking for. But Super Mario Bros. 2 was the real masterpiece for me. It felt miles ahead of the original. I absolutely love that all of the characters controlled differently. Mario felt like Mario, of course. Toad was like a faster version of him. But I'm mostly stuck with Luigi because of his crazy floaty jumps, or the princess because of her ability to hover across gaps. I also love the technical upgrades. The game let you walk backwards or up and down, and the camera would actually scroll to follow you. As for defeating enemies, at first, it didn't make sense that jumping on enemies didn't kill them. Instead, you had to pluck them out of the ground and hurl them at each other, which I ended up really enjoying. The levels felt so much more alive and creative. My absolute favorite was the whale level where you had to use the whale's water spout as moving platforms. It was awesome having a variety of different bosses too, instead of it just being King Koopa, even if most of them were just palette swap birdos shooting eggs at you. Now, the game wasn't perfect. There were absolutely things I hated, specifically the Phantos. Those incredibly terrifying masks that aggressively chase you the absolute second you pick up a key. I also hated how the stars and extra lives would slowly float up from the bottom of the screen. I hated trying to find mushrooms to increase my health bar, which felt like complete guesswork, hoping you drop your potion in the exact right spot. And I really missed the fire flower. I just wanted to shoot fireballs again. But mostly, I really just hated those freaking masks. Despite the nightmare fuel, it was a joy to play. Especially once I found out that there wasn't a level timer to explore at whatever pace I wanted. I know that Super Mario Bros. 2 gets a bit of a bad rap online these days just for being the weird outsider of the franchise. I even find myself returning to the original Super Mario Bros. More often than a sequel. Still, at the time, no, it wasn't the Super Mario World game I wanted, but in my mind, it was close enough.